businesses move in cycles. They're not static. I make this joke often, but if you don't think technology or the business environment we live in America is evolving, try to Google Blockbuster on your BlackBerry. Like, it's just not gonna happen. Hey everyone, welcome to the Make Your Money Matter show. I'm Brad Barrett. What is the Dow Jones Industrial? Have you ever asked yourself that question? We hear it a lot. It's actually become somewhat of a household name, but what actually is it? What's the history behind it? And why do we refer to it as the market? And ultimately today we're gonna be discussing this and really, how do we understand it? But before we do that, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. Let's go. All right, to understand the Dow Jones Industrial a little bit better, we have to go back in time, specifically to the 1880s. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is named after a man named Charles Dow and a man named Edward Jones. More on that in a second. So Dow grew up in the New England area. He wrote for newspapers. He was a writer. He wrote for everything including the Providence Journal, the Springfield, Massachusetts newspaper, and the Daily Republican. So his background was journalism. Eventually, fun fact here, Dow would become the founder of the Wall Street Journal. Now, Edward Jones was primarily a statistician, a numbers-based kind of guy. But by the way, in case you're jumping ahead of me here, oddly, this Edward Jones bears no relationship to the Edward Jones who founded Edward Jones Investments. Two totally different guys. So in 1882, Charles Dow, the journalist, and Edward Jones, the statistician, partnered with a third guy, a guy named Charles Bergstresser, to form a company called the Dow Jones and Company. Now, Bergstresser, like Dow, was primarily a journalist, but he was also what you would consider a money guy. He came up with the finances, really needed to begin the Dow Jones and Company, and they located their company, of all places, Wall Street. Now, a few years later, in 1889, because of their new company and really where it was located, Bergstresser suggested to Dow to name a newspaper he was starting, the Wall Street Journal. Interesting fun fact there. So Charles Bergstresser, if you think about it, was actually pretty creative in my opinion. He was also, from all readings and discussions, very modest. He wished to be a silent partner in the new adventure, Dow Jones and Company. He didn't want his name in the lights. So in 1882, the three partners opened the door of their new company, located on Wall Street, and the sign on the building simply read Dow Jones and Company. The company itself began operations as a simple investment company. But in 1884, Charles Dow had a great idea. So rather than tracking companies individually, he thought that he'd track a group of companies, really providing a broader look at how the US economy was performing as a whole. By the way, this type of grouping that I'm referring to is what we basically know today, what he was inventing, became known as the index. Now, Charles Dow actually created several others. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So that was the very first, if you think about it, the very first index focusing on a group of companies, specifically on the transportation sector of the US economy. And in 1896, he created the second index that we know today as the Dow Jones Industrial Average. This index tracking the results of 30 of the largest companies in the US involved in, at that time, heavy manufacturing. Now today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is still composed of 30 companies, but hardly any having to do anything to do with heavy manufacturing. It's made up of companies like American Express, Apple, Walgreens, Goldman Sachs, IBM. There's 25 other household names, one of which I want to bring up today on today's show that I'm going to be talking about. And as you might imagine, because an index represents a cross-section of American businesses reflecting essentially what is going on in the US economy as a whole, index performance, good or bad, can be pretty susceptible to policy coming out of Washington, D.C., as well as being affected by unforeseen geopolitical events around the world. There was actually an article in MarketWatch a few years ago that carried the title, The Dow Jones' Tumultuous 120-Year History in One Chart. Now in this article, they examined the Dow's performance since 1896. And as the article states, and I quote, the chart shows the index peaks and troughs have reflected the index triumphs and tribulations. But more than that, The graph also illustrates how the Dow has become a chronicler of investors' responses to significant global events. Further along, by the way, in this article, they write, investors must stay fluid to changing market conditions. There's no get-rich-quick scheme. Investing is more challenging than brain surgery, end quote. So with the history of the Dow, that quote and why I chose to look at that today, in that article stuck out to me because it says so much about what we here at One Capital Management, what we really want this show to be about, and we do for our clients or anyone who's heard of our firm, is what good investment advisors and good financial advisors should be doing for clients is really making sure that we manage the risk and using the market indexes like the Dow Jones, the S&P 500, the Russell 2000. Again, these are all indexes, and they're able to take a look at the broader US economy as a whole. And diversification matters between these indexes and really between the companies that represent these indexes. So with the history of the Dow, I mean, that quote to me and that article stuck out because it says so much about what I think any good investment manager, any good advisor should be doing for their clients. They should be making sure that we're managing the risk and using market indexes like the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500, the Russell 2000, all of which are also indexes that we'll talk about a little bit today. And they're all have the ability now to take a look at the broader US economy. And it's important to make sure that, and why I want to touch on this today on the Make Your Money Matter show is why understanding what an index is and how that fits into your overall plan is really important to make sure the success of your investment plan works for what your goals and objectives are for your money, whether that's retirement, being financially free, or whatever that might be. Now, I want to take a moment and talk about one of the companies in the Dow Jones Industrial. In fact, the oldest company that has been in the Dow since inception. There's a town in Massachusetts. So any of my viewers right now who live in the northeast area of our country, the city of Lynn. And in the city of Lynn, there is a huge General Electric plant that actually represent a lot in our country. They're a piece of American industrial history. You see, in 1883, the Thomson-Houston Electric Company was formed in Lynn to help satisfy really the country's growing demand for electricity at the time. Now, at that time, America was going through, like many of you history buffs out there like myself, we're going through a period of rapid industrialization, as we've all come to know as the Industrial Revolution. The Thomson-Houston Electric Company was largely funded with money from Lynn's businessmen of their town, many of whom, by the way, made fortunes in, believe it or not, shoe manufacturing. I know, crazy. And one such investor was a guy named Charles Coffin, who owned the Coffin and Clough Shoe Company. Now, Charles Coffin was, for all intents and purposes, a very well-respected and capable businessman. And when Lynn's business community was looking for someone to head the newly formed Thomson-Houston Electric Company, they chose the shoe magnet. I mean, why wouldn't you, right? So then in 1892, as fate would have it, the Thomson-Houston Electric Company of Lynn merged with Edison General Electric Company out of New York to form one larger entity, as we know it today, as General Electric. Now, a quick aside, for anyone's thinking of Ronald Reagan's voice right now, I'm with you. Yes, I'm talking about that General Electric. And Charles Coffin, the Lynn, Massachusetts shoe tycoon, became GE's first CEO. And soon thereafter, in 1896, a financial genius of the name of Charles Dow, who we just spoke about, formed his iconic stock index, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which back then, to be fair, only consisted of 12 companies, one of which, and why I'm bringing it up today, was General Electric. Now, let's fast forward about 120 years. GE, fun fact here, remained the only original company still listed in the Dow, which is actually quite a testament to the staying power of a quintessential company. One that was once synonymous, in my opinion, I think, to a lot of people with American business. But since 2017, GE is no longer part of the Dow. It was actually replaced by Walgreens, the drugstore. You see, businesses move in cycles. They're not static. I make this joke often, but if you don't think technology or the business environment we live in America is evolving, try to Google Blockbuster on your BlackBerry. Like, it's just not gonna happen. And I bring up General Electric as an example, being one of the oldest the first original 12 of the Dow Jones Industrial. And even though it's not in there today, it only left a couple of years ago. It shows the staying power of a company. I think it's quite a story to tell also how it kind of all came together, right? But it also tells the story of the evolving aspect of our country, whether through technology. We are no longer in the industrialized revolution phase of our country. We're in a much different economy than we were 120 years ago. So the fact that we went from 12 companies to 30 is one thing, but also the types of companies that are in there have changed. And as an example, let's return to the original 12 companies that first made up the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So in addition to General Electric, there was the American Cotton Oil Company, the American Sugar Company, the American Tobacco Company, the Chicago Gas Company, the Distilling and Cattle Feeding Company, very great marketed names here, right? The Lacede Gas Company, the National Lead Company, the North American Company, very specific and greatly marketed. That brand manager should win an award for that one. The North American Company, the Tennessee Coal, Iron, and Railroad Company, the U.S. Leather Company, and the United States Rubber Company. Now, all of these companies, as you can very easily see just with their names, because they didn't have obviously brand experts at that time, right, were involved in traditional heavy industry. In their day, they were the bluest of blue chip stocks. But today, the 30 components that make up the Dow have little or nothing to do with heavy industry. And I bring that up largely because, again, the face of American business has changed. Understanding what an index is, where it started, everything from Charles Dow to Edward Jones and their combination together. And I always found this story very fascinating in terms of Charles Dow in particular, deciding to set up an index, which first was a transportation index because that was really important in that time period. Then all of a sudden evolving a couple of years later into the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I mean, this guy was also the founder of the Wall Street Journal. I mean, you got to give the guy some credit, right? And so one thing I want to bring up when we talk about an index, we consider it the market, right? And it's important to understand when you look at whether you're watching CNBC or any outlet out there looking at the market or looking at Market Watch on different things, you got S&P 500, you have Dow Jones Industrial Average. They represent the country, the companies that represent our country and across the world, for that matter, do businesses across the world that trade on our US stock market. So understanding the index and the components inside of them matters. And I think it's important, and I want to bring it up because I get asked it a lot. From younger investors sometimes, even from senior investors sometimes. They're like, I'm not entirely sure what the Dow means or the S&P 500. I kind of have an understanding. And I think sometimes in life, looking back allows us to look forward. And I think the history of where it started, the Industrial Revolution, the need to track a grouping of companies, I think is a really, really genius idea, something we use today. And we literally call it the market. And when we talk about the market, we think about risk. Risk means different things to different people. I think if you ask yourself right now and then you ask your friend or someone else, everyone carries their own different types of risk, their own aversion to risk, their own ability to take on risk based on their life, whether it's their own natural component or it's something they've lived through circumstantially. And as an advisor for nearly 20 years, I find that when we talk about risk tolerance questions, it has a lot to do with how our clients perceive risk and what they know about the market. I'll say this. I hear a lot of people calling from the show, from the radio program, and say, Brad, I don't like the market. I'm scared of it. And to me, and why I wanted to talk about today's show was it's really more about understanding. Think about this. Human nature is very simple. We don't like what we don't understand. And so if you take that into the world of market, for example, we may say we don't like the market. We may say we have a fear of it, but what we're really saying is, I don't truly understand it. Wouldn't you agree? And so if you think about that, when you find counsel or an advisor, it's not just offloading the investment work, it's actually an educator. It's someone to help you understand the market for yourself. I share this a lot with clients. When we work with a client, we're more partnering with them to manage their money, manage their risk, manage their planning. It's not a dictatorship here. It's a discussion. I think a lot of advisors take that approach. They'll kind of say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put in this program. We'll follow this investment model and so on and so forth. The reality is it's the client's money. It's their life they're trying to detail out. Our job is to be the right artist for them, to understand what the goal is about it and paint the picture that suits their goals, their objectives, their needs, their wants, everything, encompassing their fears. So if you're out there watching and you kind of go, well, that was an interesting history lesson. on the Dow. Cool, Brad. Well, there's more to it, right? Because understanding the market is really important to understanding how you want to invest. I'll say this right now. Most people come in and say, Brad, I'm scared of investing. Again, it's one of those things where it's not that you're scared. I think it's more that you're misunderstanding what risk means to you and where investing means to you. I see a lot of people coming in with credit card debt, with liabilities, with car loans. Like, you're okay with that debt, but you're not okay with investing that same payment on the car into the market because you see the car, it's tangible. You want that car, it's the right color, it's the right design, it gets you from point A to point B, right? Investing's sometimes really boring and lame sometimes. It doesn't get your rocks off like buying something new, like that retail therapy. And I understand that, but investing for yourself now, there's something I've shared before that's be kind to your tomorrow self. Think about that for a second. What you do today, the ripple effects that you do today matters for yourself tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Invest today, understand the market, understand what an index is and what it means to you, whether it's in your 401k, your brokerage account, understanding where cash leads into investing, all of that matters. 30 years ago in our country, risk meant opportunity. Nowadays, it largely means fear. And for me, an opinion, I would actually say a lot of that has to do with the massive amounts of communication that we now have in the past 20 or 30 years that we didn't have before. All this communication we can get at our fingertips as fast as possible. We can develop an opinion about something within a matter of minutes by just looking on Twitter or Googling something. And some of it's good, some of it's bad. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show, being a experienced advisor of nearly 20 years, was to really tell the truth, talk openly and with everyone around what the market means and how you should look at investing. Not necessarily stock picking or why do this or why do that, but truly understanding the why. Because once you understand your why, I always ask this of clients, why you do what you do with your money matters. Your money matters. Why you are doing what you are doing matters. If you don't know your why, you're not gonna know what to do. And anything you are gonna do with it is really gonna be, at some point, you're gonna be sitting in your bed, middle of the night, being like, should I be doing that? Should I be doing something else? Maybe I'll move off that investment, I'll move to something else. Discipline and discernment win out. And when it comes to your money, an important topic, especially for those that are watching right now who have worked and maybe are closer in retirement for 30 or 40 years, you wanna be a good steward of your assets for you, for your spouse, for your kids, for your community. So you wanna be doing the right things with those assets because assets, if you think about it, is multi-generational. It's not just for you. And anyone who sees past themselves like that can really see why money matters and how it can be so impactful to you, to your family, and again, to your overall community. All right, friends, it's time for the question of the day. Now, if you have a question or topic you'd like me to address, you can leave a comment or question in the comment section, or if it's something a bit more personal, you want to go one-on-one, just go to the About page on our channel and you can send us an email. We always keep the questions we read here anonymous, so you never have to worry about your name being shared, but we'd love to hear from you. And the question that came in from one of our outlets was actually, there was two that I wanted to read today. The first question was actually very simple, and I want to at least address right away, was, Brad, how do I get started in investing? And it's a great question. Look, I've said this statement before. I think it's a great quote for investing, for life in general. Alexander Graham Bell once said, the only difference between success and failure is taking action. The first thing you want to do is actually take action. Move toward investing. If that's a call to an advisor, you can call us, you can call someone you know in your community, but find someone that can help you build a portfolio who's experienced, who's credentialed, and by credentialed, I mean has a CFP, a CFA, someone who is really designed and experienced to help you with your investing. I think that matters. And I think we can take this into different areas of our life if we think about it. We can relate to it in other areas than just investing. If you work out or want to get back on track, typically that New Year's resolution kind of stuff, right? You'll hire a trainer, you'll hire someone to help you with your diet. We do all these kind of things, but we tend to look away for something as important as investing for an advisor. And really all it is advocacy. So find someone that help you with the 2 Ds I always talk about, discipline and discernment. I think that's the best way. Everyone talks about, setting up a brokerage account. I mean, you can just Google anything. You'll find a bunch of custodians marketing to you. Set up an account here, trade here for free, this, that, and the other. And that's fine. start getting into an index fund, maybe look at something like that. But more than anything, stay disciplined to your investment approach. And that's where I think an advisor comes in. And the second question that came up that actually had a lot to do with today's topic a little bit. The question came around, what's the difference, Brad, between a large cap, middle cap, or small cap company? And I think this is actually a great question because we hear these terms sometimes like we hear an index, and we don't totally understand how or what they mean. So first and foremost, the word cap, that shortened word right there, stands for capitalization. And there's different rules of thumb here, but how I was trained 20 years ago was essentially the way you get to a market capitalization is by taking the amount of shares outstanding and multiplying it by the share price. If that equation gets to a number higher than 10 billion, then it's considered a large capitalized company. Think Verizon, think AT&T, or I'm just using telecom as an example, but you can use those as an example if they have a big reach in the world. If the number is between 2 billion and 10 billion, it's considered, middle capitalized company or mid cap. Anything between $500 million and 2 billion is considered small cap, and then less than $500 million is considered micro cap. You obviously get a little bit more risky, a little more growth as you go down in capitalization because they're more growers. They haven't hit their mass where they are really seeing a spread in their company and getting to that market capitalization that they want. Now, again, those numbers and those variations can move from person to person, but that's the general consensus of what's considered a large cap all the way down to a micro cap. And again, a micro cap, or the word cap, is just capitalization, market exposure, market reach. Typically, when you have a large cap company, you'll have more of a value play, more of a dividend environment, so more of a stable, able kind of company. Once you get down to the middle cap, small cap, micro caps, you get in a little more of the growthy. Again, I use that word often, right? That growthy, kind of a company that's still looking to grow and build their market cap. So again, if you have a question or comment you'd like me to read here, leave it in the comment section. Or again, you can email us in the About page on our channel. And before we go today, if you found anything helpful today and want to learn more, you can visit us on our website at onecapital.com, or you can scan the QR code on the screen with your smartphone. It'll get you right there as well. You can also call or text us. We want to help. Look, there's no pressure. We don't treat people like a number. In fact, we value relationships. It's the lifeblood of what we do. So click, call, or text us today. And if you're not following us on social media, you should be. We're sharing great information on all of our social media platforms. And as I often say, if you enjoy the show, share it with someone you like. And if you don't like the show, I guess share it with someone you don't like. But until next week, always remember, make your money matter.